Hi everyone, it's me. Today we're going to talk about what wiped out the first Europeans. Now this is kind of a continuation of our series, where we take well-known historical mysteries, things like who killed JFK, or what happened in the Mary Celeste, and so on, and apply the knowledge that we have today to see if we can shed some light on these historic enigmas. So for those of you just joining us, this is a brief history. We look at unsolved mysteries from a modern perspective. Today, we're going to be looking at the oldest unsolved mystery of all, what happened to the first Europeans. The theory of evolution by natural selection has been known and accepted by scientists since the mid-19th century. The theory holds that life on Earth began in simple forms and then evolved over millions of years into more complex forms. One such form was man. The earliest fossils of primitive men date back some 6 million years, and this is where our story begins. According to the fossil record, the first humans appeared in Africa and then spread across the world, replacing the various hominid species that came before them. But there is a missing piece to this evolutionary puzzle. Until recently, we had no idea what happened to the previous inhabitants of Europe. There are no traces of Neanderthals or other archaic human species found in Europe before the advent of Homo sapiens. So what happened to them? Did they die out slowly through natural causes? Were they wiped out by a catastrophic event, or did something more sinister befall them? This is what we will explore today. Before we get started, I would ask that you please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content and consider supporting us on a crowdfunding platform. There are three main theories as to why Europe was essentially virgin territory when our ancestors arrived. The first is the multi-regional hypothesis. This theory holds that the first hominids came from Africa, but then interbred with local hominid species as they spread across the world. For example, Homo erectus could have interbred with Homo habilis as they migrated north. Eventually, modern man would evolve independently in each region, until all humans were anatomically modern Homo sapiens around 40,000 years ago. The problem with this theory is that it does not explain the sudden appearance of modern man in Europe, and there is little evidence to support the interbreeding hypothesis. In fact, studies of Neanderthal DNA have shown that they almost certainly did not interbreed with Homo sapiens, which would indicate that the two species were reproductively isolated. And if they were in Europe, why are there no transitional fossils between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals in Europe? The second theory is the replacement hypothesis. This theory holds that the first humans came from Africa and then replaced all other species as they spread across the world. This includes the Neanderthals who lived in Europe. This theory is supported by the fossil record. As our ancestors moved into a region, the native hominid species seemed to die out. For example, Homo neanderthalensis died out around 32,000 years ago, only to be replaced by Homo sapiens. However, this theory does not account for how quickly the replacement occurred. According to the fossil record, our ancestors entered Europe somewhere between 45,000 and 40,000 years ago. Yet somehow, within 5,000 years, every trace of the Neanderthals disappeared. How did this happen? Well, one possible answer lies in the third theory, the single origin or African replacement model. This theory builds on the replacement hypothesis, but holds that all non-African populations of modern humans went through a dramatic population bottleneck in the last 100,000 years, leaving Africa around 70,000 years ago. During this time, only an estimated 1,000 survived and they repopulated the world. Our European ancestors would have been part of this group. Since there was little genetic diversity in this group, there would have been very few, if any, interbreedings with local hominid species. Also, Because the group was so small, it's unlikely that any transitional fossils would have been preserved in the archaeological record. This would explain the sudden appearance of modern man in Europe and the seemingly overnight replacement of the Neanderthals. But what caused this dramatic drop in population size? Well, the evidence suggests a massive climate change event, possibly a sudden ice age. About 70,000 years ago, the Earth experienced a period of rapid climatic change. The temperature fluctuated wildly and precipitation levels dropped dramatically. This lasted for about 1,000 years and is known as the Younger Dryas event. What caused this sudden shift is unknown, but it may have been triggered by a large meteorite impact. Evidence for this is found in ice cores from Greenland, where a layer of charcoal and nano-sized diamonds dating back to 12,900 years ago was discovered. These diamonds are thought to have been created by the impact of a meteorite on rock deep within the Earth, while the Younger Dryas ended 11,700 years ago. The North American monsoon also ended at this time, causing widespread drought and desertification. All of this combined may have caused the population bottleneck that gave rise to the single erosion theory. But how did this affect Europe? Well, the Younger Dryas may have coincided with the last glacial maximum, which saw much of Europe covered in ice sheets up to 4 kilometers thick. This would have made most of Europe uninhabitable. With the sudden onset of an ice age, whatever hominid species were in Europe would have faced a bleak future. Either they would have been forced south into more hospitable climates, or they would have had to adapt to the harsh conditions of the ice age. Unfortunately for the Neanderthals, it seems that they were unable to do either. To understand why, we need to take a closer look at who the Neanderthals were. Neanderthals were stocky, short people with long forearms and necks. They had receding chins and prominent brow ridges. Their brains were slightly larger than ours, and their bodies were perfectly adapted for living in cold climates. In fact, many anthropologists believe that Neanderthals were better suited to live in cold climates than we are. So why did they disappear? Well, it may have had something to do with their lifestyle. Unlike modern humans, Neanderthals did not farm or raise livestock. Instead, they were nomadic hunters. They lived in caves and hunted large animals for food. This lifestyle is perfectly suited for a hunter-gatherer society, but it has its drawbacks. If the game animals migrate due to a changing climate, then the human population would have to follow. This puts a great deal of strain on the food supply and makes it difficult to establish permanent settlements. It also means that the population is constantly on the move, which makes it easier for disease to spread. In fact, recent research suggests that the Neanderthals suffered from several endemic diseases. Analysis of their bones revealed high levels of certain proteins, indicating that they suffered from arthritis, anemia, and even leprosy. This would have made them weaker and less able to defend themselves against both predators and rival human species. Speaking of rivals, the arrival of our ancestors may have sealed their fate. While there is no evidence of direct conflict between the Neanderthals and our ancestors, there is evidence that the two species competed for resources. Both species lived in the same areas and hunted the same animals. Our ancestors may have simply been more efficient hunters, which would have put pressure on the food supply and forced the Neanderthals to migrate further north. Once there, they would have faced even harsher conditions and become even more vulnerable to disease. All of this may have culminated in the Younger Dryas event. Perhaps the Neanderthals, weakened by disease, were unable to adapt to the sudden climatic shift and perished as a result. Our ancestors, being more adaptable, were able to survive and flourish. Whatever the cause, the end result is clear. Within a few thousand years, the Neanderthals were gone. Their bones no longer contained any trace of human DNA. Their genes had effectively been wiped from the gene pool. Some researchers have suggested that the Neanderthals may have actually interbred with the early humans and that they contributed to the gene pool of modern Europeans. This would mean that modern humans and Neanderthals were able to reproduce despite the vast differences between the two species. While this is possible, it's not likely. The two species appear to have been reproductively isolated, meaning that they could not interbreed. In fact, studies of Neanderthal DNA have shown that they almost certainly did not interbreed with Homo sapiens. The disappearance of the Neanderthals remains one of the greatest mysteries of human evolution. It appears that they were perfectly adapted to their environment, yet they still died out. What caused their demise is unknown, but it may have been a combination of factors: disease, competition for resources, and a changing climate. Whatever the cause, the end result is clear. The Neanderthals are no longer with us, and their genes have been effectively wiped from the gene pool. So that's my theory on what happened to the first Europeans. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching.